Hey there friends, welcome back to the channel. Now if you've been following my photography for a while, you'll know that when it comes to rangefinders, they aren't exactly my favorite style of camera. But I will always make an exception to that rule, and with that is that medium format rangefinders is a type of camera that I can really get along with. So today I'm going to be reviewing a very dangerous camera for me, but overall an absolutely stunning camera, the new Mamiya 6. So as always, let's head back to the studio. I can give you a little bit about the history of this brilliant camera, go over the camera itself, and a little bit about the functionality, and you can join me back here in a few. So what makes the Mamiya 6 so interesting as a camera is that it is a direct successor of the original camera line that came out of Mamiya. So in May 1940, Mamiya formed as a company, and immediately their first product was a 6x6 folding rangefinder that took 120 film. Now, usually when you have a folding rangefinder, you focus via the lens helical or by moving the bellows back and forth. But the Mamiya 6 was unique in the sense that it actually focused by moving the film plane. Now, over the first 3 years of operations, they would produce 5 different models of the Mamiya 6. The 1, the 1A, the 2, the 2A, and the 3. And what really set the Mamiya 6 apart was that the purchaser could bring the lens and the shutter that they wanted to be installed on the camera. So as a result, there's no real standard lens or shutter, so it makes it very difficult to track the number of subvariants of each of the 5 main model cameras. Of course, as you know, in December 1941, Imperial Japan attacked the US naval base at Pearl Harbor, catapulting both Japan and the USA into the Second World War. But as Mamiya was not a lens manufacturer, they escaped a lot of the nationalization of the optics industry that companies like Olympus, Nikon, and Canon all faced during the conflict. But they weren't immune to the conflict either. They ended up having their one and only factory bombed by American bombing campaigns during a potential prelude to an invasion of the Japanese home island. But after the dust settled and the American occupation of Japan began, Mamiya would be selected to be one of the first camera makers to start producing again. The problem is that the Americans laid out some pretty strict rules for them, and that meant they needed to hit a certain target by producing for the foreign market rather than the domestic market. So in 1948, Mamiya produced the Mamiya 6 Model 4. So what set the 4 apart from the previous pre-war and wartime models of the Mamiya 6 was that it continued to be a 6x6 rangefinder, focusing achieved by moving the film plane, but it lacked a waist level finder as before, but it also finally had some standard optics. And that would be some of the earliest examples of Mamiya Secor optics, as well as some post-war Zuiko optics produced for Mamiya by Olympus. So from 1948 to 1953, the Mamiya 6 Model 4 was really the only camera being produced by Mamiya. And then starting in 1953, they did a massive rapid fire of different models of the Mamiya 6. Starting with the Mamiya 6.5, and then the Mamiya 6K, which was a budget model, so it removed the auto stop feature for the film advanced and went to a simple red window finder. And then beyond that, there were some various cosmetic changes with the Mamiya 6 Model 4B and the Model K2. You then had the Mamiya 6 Automat, which included the ability, so as soon as you advanced the film, you then, it would also cock the shutter. And then you had the Model 6 4S and the P and the Automat 2, and basically all these were really changing the overall exterior look of these cameras. It's pretty complex, the early line of Mamiya 6. It's just weird. But production of these all stopped in 1959. And of course, we all know Mamiya went on to produce several successful medium format cameras since then. And then in 1986, they introduced at Photokina of that year the new Mamyia 6. And the new Mamyia 6 offered up a really great modern version of the original folding rangefinder. It again was a rangefinder in a rigid polycarbonate body. It had an internal light meter, and more importantly, it offered interchangeable lenses. 3 different ones, a 50mm, a 75mm, and an 150mm version. They did a slight, this hit markets in 1989. They did a slight update, replacing a couple of icons with plain text to clarify the functionality of the camera. And then in 1993, they released the new Mamyia 6 MF, or multi-format. And that allowed you to shoot in both the 6x6 and the 6x4.5 centimeter image format. And also 35mm gave you a panoramic image. Ultimately, these would all be canceled in 1996 in favor of the Mamyia 7, which was based on the same sort of rigid rangefinder camera model, but produced a 6x7 negative. And that's a very brief rundown of the new 6. Now let's take a closer look at it. And here it is. This is the new Mamyia 6, or the new 6 as I tend to call it these days. If you're familiar with cameras from this era, it will look instantly familiar. It does appear like some of the later Fuji medium format cameras, especially the automatic ones. It is an absolutely gorgeous camera, very reminiscent of the stylings of the late 80s, early 90s, where they started to get away from the more boxy, angular appearance that dominated the mid 80s and into the more smooth designs of the 1990s. What I really like about this camera is that it does follow almost the traditions of the original Mamyia 6. While not being a folder, you do see that sort of rigid lens mount that pops out from the camera body itself that is reminiscent of the bellows of the cameras of the 40s and 50s. But let's take a closer look at the camera itself. Of course, you have here the camera mount that slides in and out of the body itself. You have the release lock for that and your lens release mount here. Up on the front, you got your viewfinder and your 2 rangefinder windows. Up on the top of the camera is where most of the controls are centered. You have the shutter release with a dedicated on-off switch. You have your EV adjustment, your shutter speed, and your film speed settings here. And then of course you have the film advance and a standard hot shoe. On the back, you got your PC socket and a self timer. And one of the really nice features on this camera is right here at the side, you have your traditional threaded shutter release socket. On the bottom, you have your battery compartment. This takes a pair of LR or SR44 batteries, and you have your dark side control here and a security release. These are the posts for the spools inside, and finally here you have your film back release. But let's take a quick tutorial of the camera itself. So the Mamyia 6 will typically come in the collapsed position. This makes it an incredibly compact camera, great for travel, and just does not take up a lot of space within your bag. So you can't actually shoot in this configuration. It will not work and it will not focus or expose the film correctly. So you press the little button here and that will release, and you can pull everything out and it locks. Now I already have a lens mounted here, but if you want to swap out the lens, you can't do it. There's a security interlock. So on the bottom, you're going to want to twist the dark slide closed, and once you do that, you press the lens release, twist, and pop it off. This means that you can swap out the lens mid-roll if you need to. And again, you line up the white with the white, in, you go. And then twist and lock. Now, what Mamiya is great in doing is, like in their C-Series TLRs, there's actually a red flag that will display in your viewfinder window. So what's really nice about that is that it lets you know that the dark side is still closed and it actually won't let you take a photo. So again, you got this little release here, up and over, boom, you're open and ready for action. Now, on the top of the camera itself, you have a dedicated on-off switch. Red is off, white is on. Now, most of the controls you're going to be working on is surrounding this center dial here. So the first thing you do is you pull up around the collar. This allows you to change and set your film speed. And what's really nice is this has a range from a top of 1600 and goes all the way down to 25. So let's just set that to 200 because that's what I'm going to be shooting at today. Now, this center button here will release it from the auto exposure. So a circle means auto exposure, and that will set it to aperture priority mode. And the square is for auto exposure lock. So you can actually take a meter reading in one location and then flip it here to lock it. Now, if you want to get out of this, you press the center release button, and then you can go into your metered manual mode, and you have speeds from 4 seconds to 1/500th of a second plus bulb. Now, you also have a plus to -2 EV adjustment, and to do that, there's this it's a little bit of a hidden button here, but you press that and then you can use your lever to adjust it. So that will give you +/2 on either end of the top or bottom of your film speed selector. So it gives you a little bit more range, all the way up to 6400 and all the way down to 6. So that gives you a little bit more, especially if you're into over and under exposing your film or push-pull processing. Okay, you have your focusing here. Now, unlike the original ones, this one uses a traditional lens focusing helical, and you have your aperture ring here. Now, to open up your film back, just press a button here, pop, and there you go. You have on one side, here's your pressure plate. You can adjust this to be for either 120 film or 220 film. And then you got two little red knobs here that will release the spool and make it super easy to actually load the film. And then you just push them in from the bottom to lock the film in place. And that's it. It's actually a really nice camera to use. Once you're done and you want to pack it up, you press the button and slides up. Nice and simple. So let's get some film loaded into this and out into the field. Okay, so I have the new 6 loaded with an expired roll of Kodak T-Max 400 speed film. I'll be exposing it one stop over at ASA 200 and pulling it in development using PhotoSpeed FD10 at a 1:9 dilution, constant rotation. I'm here in downtown Milton, Ontario, and let's get into the real meat of this review, how I feel and my experience about using the new 6. Let's walk. you've been following my photography and my reviews, you'll know that rangefinders aren't exactly my favorite camera to work with, but I'm going to make an exception for medium format rangefinders because the new 6 is a stunning camera to use and makes working with a rangefinder easy, even jumping from an SLR. First off, the camera is well laid out, the controls are simple and easy to handle, and the camera can be carried around all day without too much trouble. The compact size with either the 75mm or 50mm lens mounted can fit easily in any camera bag, and even adding the 150mm lens won't take up too much extra space. Overall, the camera is well balanced. The viewfinder is big with an equally big rangefinder patch, which makes focusing a breeze, and there are even frame lines to help with compositions, but there's no automatic magnification, but that shouldn't matter because the frame lines automatically update depending on what lens you have mounted. Once you're out shooting, all you have to do is extend that lens mount to ensure that focusing is accurate and you don't end up with 12 blurry frames. It doesn't matter if you're working with aperture priority metering or a metered manual. The light meter on the new 6 is accurate, and I've never had a badly exposed frame. The new 6 makes for a great travel camera, even with the 6x6 frame format, which you can always then crop in post-processing to either portrait or landscape orientation. But honestly, I love working with that 6x6 format, especially for travel work and just general photography. Gives it a little extra challenge when composing the shot and makes a unique print in the end. This is a super fun camera to use. It's really easy, nice, simple to use, almost right out of the box, but I do highly recommend reading the manual just to get the little quirks and nuances of this camera taken care of. Well, that's all 12 frames shot. Let's go back to the studio and talk about what makes this camera even more special. The ability to change out lenses, and I will see you back here in a few. Okay, so optics on this camera. If you love Mamiya Six optics, then you are going to love the optics on this camera. Even though they don't say Mamiya Six anymore, they still are the same sharp, hyper-realistic, super contrasty glass that you know and love with any Mamiya camera system. The 645, the 6x7s, and even some of the 35mm options, and of course their amazing C-series TLRs. Now, as I mentioned in the original history of the camera, Mamiya only produced 3 lenses for this, which is both good and bad at the same time. Good in the sense that if you want a complete kit, you don't have to do a lot of extra shopping around. You only have 3 lenses to acquire. Bad because, again, you have such a limited range. So at the wide end, you have a 50mm f4 lens. Now this is the one lens that I have not actually tried out, but if it's anything like the other ultra wide lenses that I have with my Mamiya M645 kit, then it is amazing and offers up a beautiful wide angle. Now, I've used 50mm lenses with 6x6 cameras before, notably the Hasselblad V system, and it is just a wonderful balance, just wide enough to capture everything, but not super wide to just make things so like weird. At the normal end, they have the 75mm f3.5. Now, there's a lot of back and forth, like what is a normal lens for 6x6? A lot of people say 80mm, some people say 75mm. Either way, it is a nice lens to have. Again, not too tight, but not too wide either, and it has a nice fast f3.5 aperture. This is the lens I used for my entire review work of this camera because it is small, well balanced on the camera, and it just makes the camera a nice compact carry around camera as well without adding too much front weight. Then you have the 150mm f4 as well. This is a lens that I had access to but never ended up using because I felt that it tilted the camera. It gave it a bit too much front heaviness and it was just a little bit more awkward to use. But again, this is a great short telephoto lens or a portrait length lens if you're using the camera for that. And again, these lenses don't add too much weight to your camera bag or the camera itself, making it a beautiful 6x6 travel camera if you have all three options. Now, if you are just buying this camera at the start, either the 50mm lens or the 75mm lens are your best options. If you're looking for two lenses, I would go with the 50 and the 75, and then the 150 as an afterthought. Unless, of course, you are using this for portrait work, then of course the 150mm lens is the perfect option. The problem is that like the camera, the lenses themselves on their own aren't cheap, as is the camera itself. Well, there we have it. That is the new Mamiya 6. This is a camera that is incredibly dangerous to me for two very important reasons. One, I really enjoy using this camera a lot. For a rangefinder camera, it makes perfect for a compact medium format travel kit because it comes with automatically, you get three lenses. That's it, right out of the gate. It is super fun to work with. It weighs next to nothing, even with the three lenses added. It does not take up that much space in your camera bag. And what makes it even more dangerous is the fact that A, I don't own this camera. B, I love it so much. C, it is really expensive on the used market. The camera body alone, you're looking at over $1,000. Tag on another $500–600 for a kit with one lens. But you know what? Best bang for your buck, you find something that has all three lenses and a functional camera body, probably in the $5,000 to $5,500 range. That really isn't that much of a payout, considering that you could buy a Leica body alone for that much. I'd take the new 6 over a Leica M body for that money any day of the week, and you can fight me on that one. So I don't see myself owning this camera anytime soon unless I divest myself of a lot of camera kit beforehand, and I'm really not ready to do that yet. So let me know in the comments below, what has been your experience with any of the Mamiya 6? Do you prefer the old folders, pre-war, post-war? Or are you more a fan of these modern cameras? Because this one is really great. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing, hitting that bell notification icon, and of course, give me a thumbs up. Thank you again to Rob Roy for loaning this beauty of a camera out. It's going to be really hard for me to give it back, but I really do have to. Until next time, my name's Alex Laux. Get out there, stay safe. Square format, actually a lot of fun to work with.